your explanation, and pray make it improbable.
There is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as uncle for motives of respect that you could not begin to appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
Ah, that is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have bunburyed all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, I don't know whether you'll be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one must adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so, and as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, to get up to town I have always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Earnest, who lives at the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear fellow, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't at all be a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You should leave that to people who have never been at a university. They do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest in order that you may be able to go into town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Now, Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it weren't for Bunbury's extraordinarily bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I've been really engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine anywhere with me tonight.
I know. You're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It's very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving an invitation.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I certainly haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do go down there, I'm always treated as a member of the family, and either sent down with no women at all, or 2. In the third place, I know perfectly well whom she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent, and that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily's a little too interested in him. It is rather a bore, so I'm going to get rid of Ernest, and I strongly advise you to do the same with Mr. your invalid friend with the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever do get married, which to me seems extremely problematic, you will be very glad to know a man like Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
No, that is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolyn, and she is the only girl I ever cared for in my life that I would marry, I certainly wouldn't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, my dear fellow, is the theory the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home has proved in half the time.
Oh, for heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear fellow, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in such a Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes so that you might have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you at Willis's tonight?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That is not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I'm always smart, aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
I hope I'm not that. It would leave no room for developments. And I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we are a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looked quite 20 years younger. And now, I shall have a nice cup of tea and one of those cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit over here, Gwendolen?
Thanks, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers. Not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its color. From what cause I, of course, cannot say. Thank you, Algernon. Oh, I have quite a treat for you tonight. I am going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. Such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It is delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
Oh, I hope not, Algernon. It will put my table completely out. Your uncle will have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he's accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and need I hardly say a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is that I have just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, I think it is high time that this Mr. Bunbury decides whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the idea is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I find it boring. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is a primary duty of life. I am always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice. As far as any improvement in his ailment goes, I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me if he would be so kind as to not suffer a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one hopes for something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has said practically everything they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I shall speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious. I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen, but if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the program I've drawn out, if you'll kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. That is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful with a few explanations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think them improper, and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. German sounds a perfectly respectable language, and indeed I believe it's so. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me?
Oh, certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite aware of the fact. And I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines, and has reached the provincial pulpits, I'm told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Earnest.
But you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest?
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, yes, I know it is, but supposing it was something else. Do you really mean to say that you couldn't love me then?
Ah, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation. And like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care for the name of Earnest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I must say there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack? No. There is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, have been more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. Well, you know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you are not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you. But you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing is being said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to save you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn!
Yes, Mr. Worthing. What have you got to say to me?
Well, you know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you've been about it. I'm afraid you've had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one. I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. Quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?